Well, what do you think, team? I've got 12:02. Time to
Right.
get the show rolling here.
Yes.
Welcome everybody to this month's edition of Brown Bagging at My Backyard. This is brought to you in the second Wednesday of the month by our good friends at Nature in My Backyard, which is a program of the Audubon Society of Greater Cleveland and the Shaker Lakes Garden Club. And this is an initiative to encourage people to turn their otherwise sterile backyards filled with ornamental shrubs and bluegrass into thriving and vibrant habitat for all manner of wild creatures, utilizing native plants so that we can, in fact, save the world. So I'm Harvey Webster, and I'm part of this group and privileged to be associated with it. And these programs that we've been bringing you are designed to give greater insights on things that you can do in your backyard by notables in our region and beyond. And we're really, really blessed this morning to have Dave Tomashefski, who is Director of Education or Educational Coordinator at Meadow City Native Plant Nursery. Now, I talked to Dave this morning, a little background scuttlebutt about the origins of Meadow City. First of all, the name, where you live in the forest city, why Meadow City? And we kind of both came to the conclusion that maybe kind of like the old stores like Circuit City and other things, the notion that meadow was a habitat comprised of native plants, and that in fact this was a different take. And being that it's based in Collinwood, it was appropriate. Dave, along with two friends, Julie Slater and Alessa Zierli, were students at Ohio State University, grad students in the School of Natural Resources, and got their master's in natural resources and ecological restoration. And all three of them got involved in a club down there called the Society for Ecological Restoration. And one of the things that they sought to do was to enhance and steward some OSU property along the banks of the Olentangy River by removing invasives and planting natives. And they all got bit by the bug, by the application of that which they were learning in their graduate studies. Upon graduation, Dave went to work at a soil chemistry lab at OSU. Alyssa, even though she's from the Dayton area, was drawn to Cleveland with ideas of opening up an ice cream store, or a place which she ultimately did and named Forgotten Fruits, that served ice cream that was flavored with native plants. Julie, who is originally from Virginia, was attracted to the idea of Northeastern Ohio, and she came second and then decided that she really wanted to get involved in the nursery business with native plants. And after a while, I guess, convinced Alyssa to do the same. And then the two of them reached out to their good friend David to leave the soil chemistry lab and come back to Northeastern Ohio, because David is a Lakewood native. And the three of them then created this wonderful native plant nursery, which originally had a pop-up location, but now is a permanent location that's open for business in Collinwood. And some of the details of that nursery business I'll let David talk about. But he's got a deep love, abiding interest in native plants and in ecological restoration. And he is a born teacher. I met him for the first time at the Pollinator Expo at the First Baptist Church over in Shaker Heights. And he's incredibly engaging, and he's got deep knowledge in native plants and their natural history, their biology, and why you should be planting them. And so we are really, really happy to welcome Dave today, and he'll be giving his talk called Soft Landings. So David, take it away.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I gave you that information really quickly this morning, and you really got it all in there. So thanks so much. That was very nice. And yeah, so welcome to today's presentation. I'm Dave from Meadow City Native Plant Nursery, and we're going to be talking about making the most of your tree with a soft landings garden. And as we'll learn, a soft landings garden is simply a type of shade garden planted at the base of a tree consisting of native plants. But I'm going to start out just by giving some background on defining native plants and their importance, And some of this may be, you've heard before, but hopefully there will be some new information here for you. Yeah, so native plants, when we say that, it simply means the plants that are present in an area purely as a result of natural phenomena. So they weren't introduced by people. And this means that in most cases, these plants have been here for a very long time, thousands of years at least. Since these plants have been here for so long, the local wildlife has had the time to evolve the ability to use these plants as a food source. This is a very long, slow process, but it means that today our wildlife
I
can
washed your ramen pot.
our wildlife can eat native plants, but in many cases cannot eat non-native plants. Plants that are
Excuse me,
recently
Dave.
introduced. Yep.
Dave, you're not sharing your screen. We just have a little tiny picture of your screen in the corner.
I washed the ramen noodle pot.
Well, it says that I'm screen sharing. I thank you so much for.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm so glad you did interrupt because I need to fix this.
I can see your screen just fine.
As
Now,
can I.
When I advance the slide, do you see the slide change?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It's for me, I'm going to switch to my laptop. Maybe that's the
And
thing.
can everybody please mute themselves when you're talking to others in your room, please? Thanks.
Okay. So let's see here. Is anyone else in the group having any difficulty seeing my screen?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'm sorry, Wendy, for your challenge in this viewing the screen, but I'm probably just going to go forward as I have it.
Dave, I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone else for now.
Okay.
So you can continue. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I'm just going to go ahead and pick up.
So now, Dave, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. All set. Thank you so much, Robin. Yeah, so since native plants have been here for so long, the local wildlife has had the time to evolve the ability to use these plants as a food source. And so this is a very long, slow process, but it means today our wildlife can eat native plants, but in many cases cannot eat non-native plants. Plants that are recently introduced, our wildlife oftentimes lacks the evolutionary adaptations necessary to eat those plants. And by virtue of their food value, our native plant communities have become the centers of entire ecosystems. And that's what you can see here in this image. These are native plant communities in Ohio as they were prior to European colonization. And in Northeast Ohio, we have the beech maple forest native plant community. This is named for the American beech and the sugar maple, our two dominant forest trees. But the beech maple forest is much more than just a plant community. It's in fact an entire ecosystem that historically would support organisms like the rosy maple moth, the wood thrush, the black bear, and so many more. Okay, so all of this wildlife that at its core is depending on native plants for its food and shelter. How's it doing? Unfortunately, there are some very troubling trends. So since 1970, there's been a 29% decrease in bird abundance throughout North America. This is cumulatively a loss of 3 billion birds. We have 3 billion birds fewer flying in the skies of North America now than we did in 1970. Zeroing in on Ohio and looking at butterflies, just in the past 20 years, there has been a 33% decrease in butterfly abundance just in the state of Ohio. That's 1 out of 3 butterflies gone. And looking at bees, there are approximately 50 species of North American bumblebees. 26% of those species are currently threatened with extinction. They're either threatened or endangered or approaching threatened. And bumblebees that just 20 years ago were quite common, like the rusty-patched bumblebee, have declined up to, the rusty-patched bumblebee has declined almost 90% in the past 20 years. And it's not the only one that's facing steep declines. So there are a lot of factors that are contributing to these declining trends in our wildlife. There's the usage of insecticides, the introduction of novel pathogens, but overall, the number one overarching cause for our downward trends in wildlife populations is habitat loss. It's the loss of those native plant communities that our wildlife depends on for its food and shelter. And this habitat loss primarily stems from agricultural expansion and increasing urbanization. As this picture shows, you can see how the natural wildlife habitat is fragmented into smaller and smaller pieces by an increasingly urbanized environment. Now, the good news is we have a huge opportunity to create wildlife habitat simply by planting native plants in our yards. And as I'll explain to you throughout the rest of the presentation, one of the most important places we can do this is at the base of our trees. So why is the base of the tree so important? Well, I'll tell you why. And to answer that question, we need to look at, what are our trees providing to our yards and wildlife? So first off, trees are oftentimes the focal point of our home landscaping. They have dramatic size, interesting structure, and striking seasonal color, as you can see by this red maple in its full fall foliage. But our trees also oftentimes have tremendous wildlife benefits. And this is partially owing to the size of our trees. Think of a tree in comparison to a wildflower. The tree is so many times larger, and the wildlife benefits that the tree provides are also going to be on just a much greater scale. And let's take a look at what those wildlife benefits are. So first off, many of our trees are insect pollinated. So this means that when those trees are in flower, they are going to be producing a tremendous amount of pollen and nectar, which is a critical food source for our bees, butterflies, moths, and other pollinators. Pollen and nectar is what these pollinators eat. They need it to live. And our native trees are producing a lot of it. And they're doing it largely at a time when there are few wildflowers blooming on the landscape. Many of our native trees are blooming in the springtime. And, in the springtime, maybe there are, of course, there are spring ephemerals, which are important within forest ecosystems. But outside of that, there's not a lot of wildflower coverage. And so these trees with their springtime blooms are really, a crucial source of pollen and nectar for our pollinators. The black cherry is a great example. In the month of May, it gets covered with these spires of delicate white flowers, and pollinators such as the large carpenter bee, depend on plants like this. Another really important wildlife benefit from our trees is the production of fruits and nuts. These are a major food source, particularly for birds and small mammals. Think about black walnuts, hickory nuts, all of the oak acorns, service berries, hackberries. The list goes on. And to continue with our black cherry example, the pollination by those pollinators in the last slide allows the fruit production. And here you can see a juvenile cedar waxwing just having a great time, eating those fruits. Now, a third wildlife benefit of our native trees, which a lot of people aren't aware of, is that our trees are a food source for a huge number of caterpillars. They're, in fact, the most important food source for our caterpillars. Our native oaks, cherries, and willows, each of these trees is going to support over 300 species of caterpillars. Now, this wildlife benefit in particular applies just to our native trees. For those evolutionary reasons that I spoke of earlier, non-native trees are very poor food for our caterpillars. But our native trees Indeed, they're a boon to the caterpillars. And why do we care? First off, these caterpillars are going to mature into moths and butterflies, beautiful creatures that have their own intrinsic value. But also, caterpillars are one of the most important organisms for supporting higher levels of the food chain, and in particular, birds. Lots of birds depend on caterpillars as a major component of their diet. To continue with the black cherry example, here we have eastern tent caterpillars consuming the foliage of a black cherry tree. The eastern tent caterpillar is going to be active in the springtime, and it produces these web-like nests that are present at the joints of the tree. Perhaps you've seen these, when you're driving down 71, oftentimes you can see the web nests in the trees along the road. And that's the eastern tent caterpillar. There are birds that really like to eat the eastern tent caterpillar. These birds include the black-billed cuckoo, the yellow-billed cuckoo, and the Baltimore oriole. The eastern tent caterpillar is a spiny caterpillar, so that's actually pretty good protection against bird predation. But the black-billed and the yellow-billed cuckoos, they can actually regurgitate their stomach linings. So those spines, which would cause internal problems in other birds if consumed, the cuckoos are immune to any issues with that. So this is a great food source for the cuckoos. And similarly, the Baltimore oriole has devised a very clever way to gain, nourishment from these caterpillars and avoid the spines. It simply pierces the caterpillar and consumes the caterpillar's insides without ingesting the outer spiny covering. So it's a very, clever move on behalf of the Baltimore oriole. Now, as important as caterpillars are to adult birds, they are much more important to the nestlings. 96% of our terrestrial bird species rely on caterpillars as the primary food for their nestlings. Here we've got a wood thrush that's feeding this big green caterpillar to its chick. And you can see here the advantage of the non-spiny caterpillar. That mother wood thrush is just going to stuff that down her baby's throat, and it makes for a very easy, very nutritious meal. But those caterpillars are really important for supporting birds. Now, the good news is, thankfully, the birds don't consume all of the caterpillars. The caterpillars that evade predation, they're going to continue to feed in the canopy of the tree until they're ready to transform into their adult form. And that's called the cocoon stage or pupation. Now, this is the key point. 90% of our caterpillars, when they undergo the cocoon stage, it doesn't happen up in the canopy of the tree. It happens on the ground at the base of the tree. So those caterpillars are going to descend from the tree canopy to the ground below to build their cocoon. And that's what you see happening here. Now, once on the ground, many of those caterpillars are going to burrow a shallow distance into the soil and form their cocoon underground. Many more are going to form their cocoon in the shelter of the leaf litter. The leaf litter that's on, the ground surface is going to conceal and protect those caterpillar cocoons. Some of these caterpillars will even use the fallen leaves as the outer layer of their cocoon. And actually, that's what's happening here in this image. What looks like a lump of leaves or the end of an old cigar in the middle of this picture is in fact a caterpillar cocoon. It doesn't look like much is happening here, but inside there, the caterpillar is maturing into its adult form, and soon the adult will emerge. And here it is. In this case, that adult is the Luna moth, one of our most beautiful moths with a 4.5-inch wingspan, long streaming tails, and beautiful lime green coloration. Unfortunately, the way that we typically landscape beneath our trees makes it almost impossible for any of the caterpillars that are consuming the tree's foliage to reach maturity. And here's a perfect example. This is a Shumard oak. It's a magnificent native tree, which on its own will support the development of over 400 species of caterpillars. But since there's mowed, raked grass going up to the base of the tree, almost none of those caterpillars will be able to successfully complete their cocoon stage. And why is that? Well, it's because frequent passes of the lawnmower are going to compact that soil. So all of those caterpillars that would burrow a shallow distance into the soil, they're not going to be able to do it. Also, where's the leaf litter? It's been raked and mowed away. So those caterpillars that depend on the shelter of the leaf litter to protect their cocoon, they don't have that shelter, and the cocoon will likely suffer from environmental stresses or from predation. And finally, passes of the lawnmower are a physical hazard. That lawnmower is going to chop up grass, cocoons, everything in its path. So instead of this kind of a landscaping beneath our trees, what we should be aiming for is this, the soft landings garden. It's simply an area of native plants at the base of the tree, which allows for the caterpillar cocoon stage to happen. As you can see from this image, it's also an opportunity to plant shade-adapted native wildflowers, which are going to provide pollen and nectar throughout the growing season for our pollinators. Now, it can be tough to find flowers that are going to do well in a shady spot. So now I'm going to describe a series of flowers which are recommended for shade gardening and soft landings gardens specifically. First off, we have foam flower. Oh, and I should say that the flowers that I'm describing, they start blooming early in the year. I'm going to describe them in a sequence from early bloomers to late bloomers, because in your garden, you want to have something blooming all the time as a resource to pollinators. So starting in the springtime, in May, we have foam flower. Foam flower is a short wildflower. These spires of flowers are only going to get about a foot tall. And in May, one of the primary pollinators of foam flower is the bumblebee. In the springtime, bumblebee queens are going to be starting their colonies for the year. And this is a crucial step. If those queens can't find the pollen and nectar resources they need early on, they're not going to be able to start those colonies, and the bumblebee population takes a big hit. So we need to provide spring blooming wildflowers for our bumblebees, and foam flower is a great one. It gets about a foot tall, and another nice thing about this plant is, although the flowers are only going to last for a few weeks in May, it has this nice, handsome foliage, and the plant spreads by stolon, which is a horizontal above ground stem, so that it forms a ground cover. And it spreads pretty quickly. So you can really fill in the space that you're planting pretty rapidly by planting foam flower. And those leaves are going to stick around, throughout the growing season. Another great early season plant for your soft landings garden is Jacob's ladder. This is going to get 1 to 2 feet tall, and those blue flowers, not only are they very pretty, but they attract a lot of pollinators. So not just bees, but also moths and some early season butterflies. And this is another one that has really handsome foliage, which is going to stick around throughout the growing season. Okay, moving on, into the summertime, it can admittedly be tough to find midsummer blooming wildflowers for a full shade situation. If you want to have mid-season interest in your soft landings garden and it is full shade, I would recommend bottlebrush grass. So this grass gets a really nice geometrical seed head that's going to be present during the summer months, and it's going to provide mid-season interest if perhaps you have not so many flowers blooming during the summertime. But I will say that many of our soft landings gardens are not actually a full shade situation. Lots of times it's a broken canopy, so you have sunlight, coming through in patches. Also, the edge of your soft landings garden is a place that's probably receiving 3 or more hours of direct sunlight at some point in the day, and you can plant partial shade adapted plants on the edge of your soft landings garden. And I'll tell you about a couple of those now. So a great partial shade plant, especially if your soft landings garden is consistently moist. If it's kind of a wet area, I would recommend Allegheny monkey flower. Does great in partial shade, moist situations, and it has, this plant's got a lot of personality. It's called monkey flower because of the resemblance of the plant's blooms to a monkey's face. And this is another one that's great for bumblebees. The bumblebees are going to climb right in there. It's like they're, climbing in the monkey's mouth. And there's extra pollen and nectar for them because this flower is kind of excluding some other pollinators. So it's a great plant for bumblebees and a really pretty one for the partial shade areas of your garden. It's probably going to get about 3 feet tall, and it'll bloom in July. Now, lots of times our shade gardens are on the dry side because you've got that tree right in the middle of it, sucking up all the water. So the shade garden can be pretty dry. In that case, I recommend early goldenrod for a mid-season flower that's going to bloom in partial shade. All the goldenrods bloom in September, but early goldenrod is special because it blooms in July. Does great in partial shade, also has very good dry soil and drought tolerance. Interestingly, early goldenrod research shows it actually has heightened importance to native bees as opposed to the non-native honeybee when you look at the goldenrods. So early goldenrod actually attracts more native bees than the other goldenrods do. And the European honeybee, which sometimes is a competitor with native bees, is not interested in early goldenrod. So early goldenrod has extra importance to our native bees, and it makes a great addition to a part shade dry situation. Okay, moving on to the end of the growing season, like September. I'm going to highlight another goldenrod. And you're going to say, oh, we've already got a goldenrod. Why talk about another one? Goldenrods have been given the title keystone plants because they are especially important in supporting biodiversity. These plants are pollinator magnets, and also goldenrods themselves feed over 100 species of caterpillars. And that's very rare for an herbaceous plant to feed caterpillars like that. So goldenrods are great for the garden. Every garden should have at least one goldenrod. And a great goldenrod for the fall is zigzag goldenrod. This goldenrod has great shade tolerance. It can grow in full shade. So if it's a dense canopy above, your planting area, zigzag goldenrod can handle it. It also forms a colony of plants by spreading through underground, stems, and gets this beautiful crown of yellow flowers in September. So I highly recommend zigzag goldenrod. It's a fairly short goldenrod. It's only about, generally only 2 or 2.5 feet tall. Another outstanding fall plant for your shade garden is calico aster. Back in 2007, the Chicago Botanic Garden did I don't know if it was 2007, but it was a few years ago. They did a long-term study looking at 119 different asters. And the objective of this study was to determine what are the best asters for Midwestern gardens. They looked at, 120 different asters, both cultivars and wild types. And only 7 asters got the highest 5-star rating. The calico aster wild type was one of those. And this is because it has a modest size. So it's going to be probably 2.5 feet tall. It's not an aggressive spreader. It has high pollinator value. and it's very aesthetically pleasing. As you can see, the center of the aster flower, it changes color from a yellow center to a rosy center. This is actually a secret message that the plant is sending to pollinators, telling those pollinators to focus their efforts on the yellow centered flowers because that's where the viable pollen is. Pollen's only viable for a period of time. And this plant, once the pollen in one of its flower heads is no longer viable, the plant will chemically induce a color change, changing the color of that flower head center from yellow to a rosy pink. And this is, it's a signal so that the pollinators don't waste their time on the non-viable pollen. It helps to increase the reproductive efficiency of calico aster, and it works. There have been studies looking at bee visitation to the plant, and they find that because calico aster keeps all of its flower heads open, even after the viable pollen is gone, it draws in the most pollinators. Pollinators can see it from a distance. But then when they get in close, they don't waste their time on those rosy centered flowers. They focus their efforts on the yellow centered flower heads. So it's a secret message that it's sending to those pollinators, and now you know it. And it's a really great looking fun plant to have in your soft landings garden. Okay, let's say you want to add some structure to your soft landings garden. Maybe you want to plant a shrub. It's a great way to do it. You're going to need to plant a shade adapted shrub. Spice bush is a great option. This is a shrub that can grow in full shade. It has very pretty autumn foliage. And if you have a male and a female spice bush, the female will produce berries, which are highly sought after by birds. Perhaps you've heard that our native berries are energy rich, and they're more nutritious for our birds, especially during autumn migration. Spice bush is a perfect example of this. By mass, spice bush berries are almost 50% fat. So that's a super energy dense berry that's going to be a really important food source for those songbirds when they're flying south. So unfortunately, when you buy the spice bush, you don't know whether it's a male or a female. So if you have space, get 3 of them. Then you have a 75% chance that you'll get a male and a female in there, and the female then will likely produce berries because of the cross-pollination. But even if you just get one, the plant looks great, adds structure to your garden, and it's a great source for pollinators as well. It has insect pollinated flowers. That tree in the center of your soft landings garden, it's not going to be around forever. Maybe you want to start planning for the future, especially if your tree is on the decline. Plant another tree in the shade of the present tree. A great candidate is the black gum. Black gum is a super shade tolerant tree. You can plant this in the shade of your soft landings garden, and eventually the black gum will be the dominant tree as it grows up through the canopy, and perhaps you remove the old tree. Black gum is recommended because it has striking seasonal color, really beautiful crimson leaves in the fall. This tree also can tolerate like the widest range of moisture that I know of for a native tree. You will find this tree in the wild growing on the edges of wetlands, but you also find it on dry, sandy ridges, which is really extraordinary. So no matter what your moisture situation, the black gum is a great option for a tree. It also produces berries, but again, this is a situation where you need to have a male and a female. And it's a great resource for pollinators. Okay, so let's say you want to create a soft landings garden. First thing you got to do is remove the pre-existing grass and other plants that might be competing with the plants that you install. A great way to do this is called the sheet mulching technique. You simply put a layer of cardboard topped by leaves or mulch on top of that lawn or pre-existing plants and you smother it. The beauty part about this technique is you don't have to wait until those plants are smothered to do your planting. You can simply brush aside the mulch or leaves wherever you want to put a plant, cut a hole in the cardboard, and put your plant there. I recently did the sheet mulching technique for a garden that I was creating, and I had a lot of trouble with the leaves blowing around. First of all, you want to put something around the space to contain the leaves. In this photo, you can see there's a short wire fence. That's a good idea. But even so, those leaves are probably going to shift. I found that if you put a very thin layer of wood mulch on top of the leaves, it'll keep them from blowing around. You want the primary mulch that you put down to simply be fallen leaves. You know, as we were saying earlier, those fallen leaves are the natural shelter for moths and butterflies when they're forming their cocoons. Those leaves are also the natural habitat for lots of other beneficial insects. Lightning bugs, let's see here. Oh boy, there are just a ton of beneficial insects that are going to be, you know, using that leaf litter layer as they develop. Beetles, assassin bugs. There's a really long list. Unfortunately, I don't have it at my fingertips, but trust me, the leaf litter is super important for a bunch of beneficial insects. So you want to make that, you know, the material you put on top of your cardboard. Okay, some other design considerations for your soft landings garden. Plant spacing. If you want your garden to fill in quickly and you want to minimize the amount of weeding that you're having to do, one plant per square foot is the optimal spacing. However, this can become kind of expensive. So if you're willing to wait and do some weeding in the meantime, you could probably go as sparse as one plant per 4 square feet as your planting density. I probably wouldn't go less than that, but that would be an acceptable lower limit. And it would just mean that you're going to have to do a bit more weeding while those plants fill in. It would probably take like 2 years. You want to plant your plants in clusters according to species. This is going to help those plants fill in faster, and it's going to help the less competitive species maintain their ground and not get overtaken by the more competitive plants. So a 3-plant cluster, as shown in the lower left part of your slide, is a good way to do it. You want to make the sides of this cluster about 2 feet if the plants at maturity are going to be greater than 3 feet tall. But if they're going to be under 3 feet tall, you can make the sides of this cluster just 1 foot. Another reason that you want to plant your plants in single species clusters is because once the flowers that those plants produce are greater than 3 feet wide in diameter, they're going to attract a higher abundance and diversity of pollinators. Additionally, if your garden consists of at least more than 7 species of wildflowers, you're going to attract a greater abundance and diversity of pollinators. In addition to the leaf litter for supporting beneficial insects, you're also going to want to perhaps put in some large rocks and logs or decaying wood. Large rocks are great shelter for ground beetles, which are an important beneficial insect, and they help maintain the balance in your garden. Decaying wood is an excellent substrate and nesting material for the green metallic sweat bee. And you may say, you know, what are the chances I'm going to get green metallic sweat bees in my garden? Well, look at this. I was just recently visiting the garden of some friends in Cleveland Heights. They had a decaying stump right next to their garden. I took a close look at it, and there they were. green metallic sweat bees buzzing all around this stump, going in and out of it. They had their nests in there. This is one of the most important pollinators in forest ecosystems, but it commonly ventures outside of that. And you can have these bees in your garden, you know, if you give them a place like this to nest. So it's really helping out those bees. Another thing you can do with your shade garden is put a border or fence around it. The reason I suggest this is because, you know, naturalists like us, we recognize the beauty in a wild looking situation. That's not true of a lot of our neighbors. It takes a little bit of, I don't know, sprucing up sometimes to make it amenable to their tastes. This is a shade garden that I put in just a few months ago. And, you know, if it didn't have this fence around it, it would just look like an area of overgrown plants because, you know, sometimes there's just not a lot that's in flower. But putting the fence around it really can make it look like a more handsome space. A sign too, you know, indicates that a native wildflower garden is there. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say about creating your soft landings garden. And oh, just a second. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to look at the time. And yeah, so please come on out to Meadow City Native Plant Nursery. You know, visit us, check out our selection. We've got a lot of great plants for your, you know, shade garden. Many of the plants that were featured in today's presentation, we have them at the nursery. So yeah, please stop by. And you know, we're on Facebook and the other social media outlets. So please follow us. And finally, yeah, you know, parents, they like to show pictures of their kids, but I don't have any kids. So I'll show a picture of my garden because I'm so proud of it. This is a shade garden that I have down in Columbus, and I still take care of with a few other folks. And this is what it looked like in the fall a couple years ago. So, you know, it's like a dreamland. It's got heartleaf aster and white snakeroot and some sweet Joe pie that has gone to seed. Yeah, so anyway, the shade garden can be a really beautiful space and certainly so important to our butterflies, moths, and other organisms. So yeah, with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. Probably folks need to be unmuted for that.
I have a
Fabulous.
question.
Go ahead.
My question is that maple trees seem to suck up a lot of moisture, and I've had trouble establishing some plants specifically under my maples. Do you have any suggestions for plants that will survive under them?
Yeah, two of our most drought tolerant plants are going to be the white wood aster and the blue stem goldenrod.
I have white wood aster. Good.
Yeah, so white wood aster, blue stem goldenrod, those are two of the most drought tolerant. Now on the edge of that space, you could plant the early goldenrod, which is a great one for the edge because it does partial shade and very good drought tolerance. Another one that you could plant on the edge would be, you know, we have a plant called white bee balm, Monarda clinopodia. This would be a good one. Purple coneflower. This is a plant that does does reasonably well in dry soils.
Yeah,
and can do
I do have that under it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's a good one. You might also try the just the you know, regular bee balm, the Monarda fistulosa on the edge. That could also do part shade. And that has very good dry soil tolerance.
Okay.
So there's a few ideas.
Good.
You could also do that grass that I mentioned, the bottle brush grass. That one does very well in these kind of dry, shady situations, and it's not overly aggressive like some grasses.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Dave, we had
Great.
a couple of questions in the chat. First
okay.
one was, are there associations between trees and flowers where some flowers perform better under certain genera of trees?
Oh, good question.
You know, I mean, there probably are, but I do not know. I don't know of those associations. You know, yeah, but these ecosystems are so complex. I certainly, would not be surprised if they exist. But the plants that I've mentioned in this program, they should generally work well under, a wide range of trees and wouldn't be excluded from performing under certain species of trees. So, yeah, but that's a very interesting question. But unfortunately, I don't have don't know of those examples.
Next question was from Lena, who said, if you have an established tree and you're putting in a soft landings garden at its base, how can you minimize damage to the tree's roots?
Yeah, this is really important because the vast majority of the roots are going to be right near the ground surface. So, you don't want to you don't want to rototill there or do some kind of really disruptive manner of weed removal, and that's why the sheet mulching technique is a good way to kill the weeds in existing lawn near your tree. Also, planting the individual plants, maybe one plant every every couple square feet, that is not going to be a significant disruption that's going to damage your tree roots. I think you can find spots to put those plants, where it's not going to hurt your tree, but it's certainly an important consideration.
The next question from Lisa is, should the soft landings extend the width of the tree canopy?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best case scenario because those caterpillars, they're feeding throughout the tree canopy. And, when they drop to the ground surface, it could be anywhere, from drip line to drip line. So ideally, you would have the soft landings garden throughout that whole space. However, I will say that, sometimes that could be a very large project. And I don't like it when projects, because of their size, become daunting, so people don't undertake those projects. So I would say whatever is manageable for you is an improvement over the conventional style of landscaping. So, if this year you only really have the time to put in a small soft landings garden, do that. Start small and then maybe just gradually add to it.
Cool. Then there's a companion question about, what about the use of sedges in a soft landings garden?
Oh yeah. I mean, sedges are, they're great because they're going to help fill in that space. And, there are a lot of shade tolerant sedges. And we certainly have some at the nursery. So yeah, I think using sedges is a good way to fill in your soft landings garden.
And the only other thing we have in the chat was a comment that from Jane, in creating the New York Botanic Garden, they never cut a root that was more than 1 inch diameter. So I guess that follows your whole idea, is respect the roots.
Oh yeah, respect the roots. But you'll be able to find space, I think, to plant your plants without harming the tree.
Great.
Dave,
Anyone else have it?
Oh, sorry, Harvey. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Robin.
I've had really good luck putting spring ephemerals right up at the edge of the root because they don't really tend to throw their roots very deeply and they spread so quickly. And then bringing those out into a carpet of sedges as it comes out. I did want to ask though, Madeline was talking about planting soft landings underneath maples and the fact that she was having difficulty with those. There is one thing to worry about there, which is that if the maple you're talking about is a Norway maple.
No.
You know better than that. Okay.
Yeah, no.
For those
No.
people who do have
The
Norway.
red maple.
Yeah, great. For those who do have Norways, you have a real problem because the Norway maple is allelopathic, and that means that its roots give off chemicals that actually try to keep other plants from growing underneath it.
Right, yeah. I have one in my tree lawn I ignore, so I'm hoping it'll die. But I
Good
didn't
luck.
plant it. Well, one of them did, one of them did.
Hey, David, we have a request. If you could put up your slide that showed the scan code to
Yeah.
Meadow City and the location.
Yeah, that's it.
There
We're
you
at
go.
the end of-
Excellent.
Yep. And we're right next to I-90. So if you take 90 to East 152nd and get off there, we're right there, just on the north side of 90.
Cool.
Thanks.
Let's see. Then there was a question from Jennifer. What do you plant under a Norway maple?
You could always try to cut down the Norway maple.
Just girdle it.
And then there's a companion
I was not aware of the fact that Norway maple was allelopathic like that. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. So, but in light of that, I'm not exactly sure what to plant there.
And then is there Alyssa says, are there any other common trees like the Norway maple that we should be wary of in northeastern Ohio? Ones that don't let other plants
Yeah.
grow around them.
Calorie pears for different reason.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of the other allelopathic trees. I know that black walnut, discourages the growth of a lot of plants, but so many of the native wildflowers, probably through sharing space with black walnut for thousands of years, are actually adapted and do just fine under black walnut. Yeah, but I don't know of other allelopathic trees like the Norway maple.
So we have one
I think
question.
you're right, Dave. I think that we don't see a lot of problems with the natives here. It's the invasives like the Norway maple. And of course, there are many invasive trees. And you can look on our website at Nature in My Backyard and find lots of lists of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we're lucky that here in Ohio we have an official list of banned invasive plants, put out by the Ohio Department of Agriculture. So that's available online too.
Yeah, that's on the site also.
Okay, David, here's a burning question. Did
Yeah.
Alyssa ever get her native plant ice cream shop off the ground? What was the fate of Forgotten Fruits?
Yeah, no, she did get it off the ground, and she was actually developing quite a loyal customer base. And I mean, it was outstanding ice cream, and I think that folks are probably really sad to see it go. There are probably some forlorn people who are searching for Forgotten Fruits now at community events, and they don't see it. She did get it off the ground; it was going well, but she just felt that her passion lied in the nursery as opposed to the ice cream.
Well, are there any other questions? If not, David, thank you. This has been very, very informative, and we've learned so much about soft landings, and we've learned about you, and we've learned about Meadow City. So thank you for all your good work. Thank you for expertise, and we encourage folks to get out and shop at Meadow City, and maybe you'll encounter Dave in the flesh there. And we encourage you to log on our next meeting will be the second Wednesday of August for brown bagging it in my backyard. Thanks everyone for participating.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So long.
Thank you.